Lesson 1, July 17th, 2016. Rough Draft. The Tree in the Forest. She's been here many times before. She knows it better than she knows the home she grew up in, mostly because this is where she went to run away from her troubled home life. The yelling and the screaming, the throwing of objects. Once she even heard her mother hit the floor. It was too much for a 12-year-old to bear, for anyone to bear, actually. So she'd sneak out her window, climb down the drain pipe, and duck past the large, thinly veiled side window. She never peeks inside. She knows what she'd see. She's seen it so many times before. Her mother protecting herself from an object or an arm about to be flung in her general direction, and her father drunk as usual. She'd make her way towards the back of the house and slide through the broken down fence her mother always asks that he fix, which almost always starts the fighting. She wonders why her mother does it. Why does she ask him the questions she knows will cause her harm as she finds the hidden path? She found this place when she was just 8 years old. He almost came at her one Saturday afternoon, but before he could lay a hand on her, her mother opened the front door and told her daughter to run. She ran and ran through the woods she was forbidden to ever play in. She wasn't exactly sure why she was running or to where. She just liked the way the wind felt pushing against her face. She stopped just before the entry into the heavily wooded area, with trees so tall in comparison to her she felt like she was surrounded by giants. There were so many leaves in the trees, the sunlight was kept out almost completely. You'd have to squint to see it, which is what she did as she leaned forward on her tiptoes and saw the slightest glimmer of light peeking through an area about 100 yards in front of her. She was practically on her tiptoes, leaning forward to get a better look, but was too afraid to go any further, for fear she might get swallowed whole by the darkness and the trees. But at 8 years old, her curiosity invariably trumped her fear, and she stepped one shaky foot after another in front of her. She turned back once to make sure no one was watching her in case she was doing something bad, an accusation hurled at her by her father on multiple occasions for as long as she can remember. No one was there, so she kept walking towards the light. Every step she took making loud, echoing sounds within the walls created by the tall trees, branches breaking and dead leaves from seasons past being crushed under her tiny, slippered feet, now so soggy and dirty you can hardly tell they were once bunny slippers. Eventually, the rugged path smoothed out just as she came into view of the most magnificent tree she had ever seen in her young life. It was also the fattest tree she'd ever seen. Nestled on top of a hill, its roots appeared to be gripping onto for dear life, otherwise it might topple over into the small stream directly under it. To her, the tree seemed alive. With its vines hanging limply from the huge trunk, she imagined the mornings she'd sneak into her parents' bedroom and watch her mother getting ready. How she'd take her time to apply makeup, even though she never went anywhere besides the grocery store, not realizing she was hiding the bruises. Then, after the makeup, she'd slide on one bangle at a time onto her wrists, dozens and dozens of bangles, and when her mother was done, she'd rotate her hands and smile at the sound they made in the silence. Little did she know her mother was always aware that her daughter was standing behind her, watching her. The bangles was her way of letting her daughter see her happy. The vines on the branches being moved by the wind passing through the trees made her happy. Ever since that day, she's been escaping to this tree in the woods. She'd bring a book to read, sitting under the shade it created for her, protecting her from the harsh sunlight. As she got older, she'd take a notebook with her to write down her sorrows, and when she was done, she'd stand up and read what she wrote out loud to her tree. She knew it wouldn't answer back, but she also knew it felt what she was feeling. During her college years, grateful to have gotten out while she still could, on a track and field scholarship, she'd still go home, being sure to avoid the large window and the front door entirely to share her hopes and dreams to her tree. It always amazed her that no one else knew about this tree, or at least no one was ever there when she was. She brought her first serious relationship to this tree one late night. Her girlfriend carried the lantern up high, illuminated several feet in front of them as they made their way into the woods so dark at night you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. They spread out a blanket under its mighty branches, now naked from the season's frost, its leaves directly under them, making noise so loudly they both giggled and giggled like two young school children expecting to be caught at any moment. But they never were. They fell asleep in each other's arms. But when she awoke, her girlfriend was no longer with her on the blanket. She jolted up and, rubbing the sleep out of her eyes, she finally saw her standing just around the other side of the tree. She heard scratching her girlfriend As she approached her girlfriend, she saw the beginnings of a heart carved into the side of the tree that would eventually contain their initials inside it. She was happy to have shared this place with someone she knew cared about her as much as she cared about the tree. 2 decades passed before she visited her tree again. In that time, she got married and had 3 children. She never visited the tree because her reasons were now both gone. She buried her mother today. She is dressed in all black. Her wife, the same one who carved their initials into the tree, squeezes her hand tightly, then lets it go, walking back the way they came, leaving her to do what needs to be done. As she steps closer to the tree, she leans her head against it. Tears fall from her eyes onto the box she is holding in her hands. It's all her mother left her. She stands up straight, squares her shoulders, and wipes the tears from her eyes. Placing her back against the tree like she had done countless times before, she slides herself down to the ground, the box now on her lap. She takes a deep breath and opens the box to see it filled with her mother's bangles. One by one, she begins to slide them onto both of her arms, tears streaming down her face as she's doing it. When she's done, she stands up under the shade of her tree just as a huge gust of wind is passing by. She spreads her arms wide, closes her eyes, and shakes her hands wildly, smiling to herself as her mother always did, hearing the sound the bangles made. She wraps her arms around herself when the wind stops, takes another deep breath and nods her head, looking up at the tree. She walks up to her tree one last time and patting it says, "Thank you, Mom. Thank you." The end.